Currently, Formula 1 is in a bit of a two-way phase, so to speak, with its drivers. You have the likes of Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso who have got acres of experience brimming from top to toe. They won everything under the sun in the sport, and there has not been a situation that they have not experienced at least once. Then, on the opposite end of the scale, you have a new and exciting crop of young drivers like Max Verstappen, Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, who will no doubt get to the same stage as Sebastian, Lewis and Fernando at some point in their careers. For Vettel, Alonso and Hamilton, all of those drivers were at least 20 years old when they made their respective debut in F1. Seemingly in modern Formula 1, if you're young and have the talent, then teams will be snapping at the heels for your services. However, even 20 years ago, that was not a common approach. This was the case for Argentinian driver Esteban Tuero, of which I hope I've pronounced the last name roughly correctly. Born in 1978, Esteban was born into a motorsport family after his father was an entry-level racing driver. Plus, he lived exceptionally close to the Buenos Aires circuit, which held the Argentinian Grand Prix at the time. Always useful, that. He started his karting career at the age of 7 and would continue to do so until 1992, moving into Formula cars in South America. In 1995, even though he was just 16 years old, he moved to Europe as his father knew that that would be the only way he was going to gain any kind of recognition from teams in F1. Now, the question you're probably asking is, was Esteban competent in Europe? The best word I would probably use to sum that question up is quite? I mean, he won that year's Italian Formula 2000 national trophy pretty convincingly, and his performance in 1996 in Formula 3 were quite impressive. In just his second race in the series, he won, up until the point he was disqualified because the car was being run with illegal fuel, somehow. Plus, in the Monaco event, which was a non-championship round, Esteban started on the front row alongside another then wannabe F1 driver, Jarno Trulli. The pair battled intensely up until the point that Esteban didn't want to be part of the train anymore and nudged Trulli off with a hairpin. Unfortunately, as soon as he got out of the train, Esteban's car battery ran flat, and so had to retire. These performances, though, were garnering interest within the F1 paddock, just as Esteban's father was hoping. High flyers Benetton were apparently keen on signing him. However, the team that ultimately signed the contract with Esteban was Minardi, who signed him as a test driver. Midway through 1996, Esteban decided that he wanted to make the next step up the ladder and raced for the Draco team in F3000, the then last step in the feeder series ladder to Formula 1. Unfortunately, he had a best result of 10th and scored no points. As a result, Draco dropped him for the 1997 season. So, you're probably thinking, well, stay in F3000 for another season with another team just to see if things stabilise or whatever. Instead of staying in F3000 with another team, Esteban took a very unusual step in heading to Asia in the Formula Nippon series. No disrespect to Formula Nippon, but it's not the usual place you'd expect to see that sort of driver head over to, but hey, once again though, results weren't particularly good. A best result of 6th gave him 1 point for the season that he did, which was not the full season. He did though require the right amount of mileage that made him F1 ready, even if he perhaps wasn't and needed a few more years to nurture. Plus, whilst Esteban did cover the right amount of mileage, he didn't meet all of the super license requirements set out by the FIA. However, Minardi gave him the drive for 1998 after impressing in his test role, and the FIA did eventually give Esteban his super license. So, there he was, sitting on the grid in 17th position on the Albert Park circuit in Australia, about to make his F1 debut as the third youngest debutant in F1 history at the age of 19 years and 320 days, only being beaten by Ricardo Rodriguez and Mike Thackwell. It didn't come without controversy though, as F1 pundit Martin Brundle said, politely, "To be honest, it annoys me, people like that with zilch credibility." That being said though, to give credit where credit is due, he did outqualify his teammate Shinji Nakano, who had already had a year's worth of F1 experience racing with Prost in 1997. His debut though lasted all of 22 laps before the Ford engine gave up the ghost. Still, it lasted 14 laps longer than his teammate's half-shaft. Brazil followed, and in turn was followed with some gearbox issues, which meant another DNF. His next round though was his home race in Argentina at the Buenos Aires track, which, like I said, he grew up near. So you'd have hoped that things would have improved somewhat. Sadly, no. What can only be described as a shambolic pit stop followed, and then to add salt to the wound, Esteban lost the rear end under braking at turn 1 and crashed heavily into the barriers. Luckily though, without any real injuries other than his pride. His best move of the season by far would end up being at the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola, after he finished an impressive 8th place. Admittedly, out of the 22 cars, just 9 finished, but still, you've got to be ready to pick up the pieces of other people's misfortune when you can. He also finished in Spain as well, with a modest 15th position. From that point on though, all seemed to fall apart. In Monaco, he crashed on the first lap. In Canada, he had an electrical issue. In France, his gearbox failed again. In Britain, he spun off and retired, and did the same thing in Austria to round off a 5-round string of DNFs. Mercifully for him, he ended that string of DNFs with a 16th place finish in Germany. Unfortunately, his engine would let go in Hungary, and then in Belgium, after having an accident of his own, he suffered yet another gearbox gremlin that put him out. Again. An 11th place in Italy would turn out to be his last finish in F1. In the Luxembourg Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, he suffered another engine failure, and in the final race at Suzuka in Japan, he collided with Teranosuke Takagi at the chicane, and in the process, damaged some vertebrae in his neck. With the season thankfully over for him, Esteban Tuero finished 4 of the 16 Grand Prix that happened that season. Some of the DNFs were down to spins and crashes, but most were mechanical issues, which was normal for that era. However, to be honest, it was a fairly uneventful season for Esteban. No real highlights per se, but equally he didn't embarrass himself, and performed admirably for his debut season. Plus, at the end of the day, he was racing for the joint worst team on the grid that year, as Minardi and Tyrrell were not impressive at all. So, all in all, a good foundation to build upon for 1999 once the injuries had healed. Minardi had planned to run Tuero again, alongside a new teammate in Spaniard Marc Genet. The team even lined him up for a test of the new car in January once Tuero's injuries had mended themselves. Then, one day, Esteban apparently walked straight into a meeting and said that he was retiring from F1 and was going to move back to Argentina. Just like that, his F1 journey came to a very unexpected conclusion. Of course, the big question in all of this is why. Why did Esteban decide that he'd had enough of Formula 1? I wish I could give you a detailed explanation to that answer. The answer, though, remains a mystery publicly, as he's never said why he decided to call time on his F1 career at just 20 years old. Of course, we can all guess reasons as to why. Homesickness, not a fan of driving F1 cars, not keen on the media spotlight, especially given that the Argentinian press were apparently giving him quite a hard time. Perhaps he was upset that the Argentinian Grand Prix had gone from the F1 calendar in 1999. Maybe he just decided that F1 was not his thing, or maybe it was none of the reasons I've just outlined, but they're the only ones that I can think of as of making this video. Only Esteban, and probably his family, truly knows what these reasons are. That being said though, he didn't quit racing as a whole. Since 1999, he'd spent most of his time racing in the Argentinian TC2000 Touring Car Championship. In 2008, he won the Turismo Nacional Argentina Class 3 Championship. That's a mouthful and a half, isn't it? Also, in 2008, he competed part-time in the FIA GT World Challenge, driving a Ferrari 550. Then, in 2016, Esteban retired from motorsport altogether at the age of 38, an age in which Kimi Räikkönen still had 2 years spare in F1. After leaving Formula 1, he wouldn't race in single-seaters ever again, albeit was rumoured to race in the kart series in 2002. In a way though, this is somewhat sad. Of course we don't publicly know why he retired, but irrespective of that, it's a shame to see such a young career that would normally have taken just its baby steps after a debut season to end in such sudden fashion. Esteban never set the world alight, but in a 1998 Minardi, he was never going to, realistically. You can only race with the machinery that you've been given. Many F1 drivers typically retire at the 36 plus mark, with some going longer than that, so in theory, if Esteban would have gotten into some more competitive machinery in the years after his Minardi days, and proved he was competent in other cars, he could have gone on to a 15+ year career. He could have been a champion or gone out with a whimper. We'll never know. To see a career that would normally yield so much future ahead of them, it's devastating to see that we won't get to see what Esteban could have really done had he not walked into that meeting in 1999. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting. To be honest, I've always kind of been quite interested to see what Esteban Tuero's career really was like, because seeing he was quite young but only was in the series for 1 year, and seeing how sudden his career just stopped in Formula 1 for no reason that we know of publicly, it's been quite interesting to look at. But anyway, and also, if anybody who's watching this video might even have some information as to why they think Esteban did retire, then feel free to say in the comment section down below, and I'd be very interested to see what they are. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching this video, and until the next one, enjoy the rest of your day.